Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Kui Kabala. I like stories. I'm an actor, I'm a radio host, I'm a podcaster, I'm a book lover. My book community is called Nairobi Book Love. Feel free to join us. And we have a fantastic quarterly event called the Read to Resist Cafe. So I've had the pleasure of being on many, many stages, and it gives me also a lot of pleasure to be on this particular stage. I was at an NBO Lit Fest last year, but this is the time that I'm the one on the stage, so it feels really, really good. So let me introduce my panel. You guys didn't clap for me, but it's fine. Thanks. I'm going to introduce my panel. My panel is #BlackBoyJoy. Can I call you boys? I can?
Sure.
It's okay, yes. So let me start with the gentleman on my left. How many of you here review books? Any book reviewers in the house? Yes, fantastic. Okay, a couple. So our first panelist is the ultimate book reviewer. I'll tell you why. His master's thesis. His thesis title was State on Society in the Novels of Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Ai Kwe Arma. His master's thesis. His doctoral thesis, by the way, he has a PhD with distinction. His doctoral thesis was Narrating Transformation in Selected African Novels. He's also done, where is this? Published a text called Intersections of Corporeality in the Novels of Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Sonny Labutansi. So reviewers, how do we feel about that now? I love it. So Dr. Gil Ndi-Shang, originally from Cameroon, based in Germany and a student of the world. He is, what else are we going to say? He is a consummate researcher, an author, and a fantastic human being. He has been in Colombia for the last couple of years, and that story may or may not have something to do with Shakira. So stick around. We're gonna find out. So please welcome our first panelist, Dr. Gil Ndi-Shang, who speaks 9 languages, by the way. Wow. Yes. So for the purposes of today, we're going to call him Gilbert or Gilles. Yeah? Oui? Yes. Oui. All right, fantastic. Our second panelist, oh my goodness. The CV is long. I don't know where to start. Let me turn the page. Hold on. There's a whole page. I'm going to read the whole thing. Okay, don't read the whole thing. Sawa, he said. But for our next panelist, acting is his first love. He's also a writer, a director, and an improv comedian. Okay? So we're going to have a break and he's going to do something for us in between. Yes. You've seen him on Mnet TV drama Changes. Remember Changes? The very celebrated Kenyan movie Nairobi Half-Life. Seen that? Yes. But it doesn't end there. He co-wrote and co-directed the film Katikati, which premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2016, where it was awarded the Fipreski Prize. Yes, that's correct. In addition to winning Best Film at Sweden Cinema Africa Festival, a New Voices, New Vision special mention at the Palm Springs International Film Festival, and the award for Best East African Film at the African Magic Viewers' Choice Awards. Let's get into paragraph 2. That was just the beginning. In 2017, he co-wrote Supermodo, which is a family film directed by Lekarian, and it also premiered at the 68th Berlin International Film Festival. It won a gazillion awards, because he's like, please stop reading my entire CV. But of all his works, my favorite has to be the direction of Too Early for Birds Tomboya Edition. How many people saw that? Yes! Fabulous, fabulous. I think it's one of the most incredible theatrical pieces we've seen in Kenya. And it's just, the CV is long, so let's just cut it short and say a very warm welcome to Mugambi Nthiga. Karibuni sana.
Thank you.
So all the world's a stage, isn't it? That's a Shakespearean quote. All the world's a stage and all the men and women are merely actors. And I don't know if you've toured, walked around here. There was, on that other stage, there's an exhibit, let me call it an exhibit, of a history of protest in Kenya. And it's beautifully curated. It's looking at how we've protested through our student bodies, how we've protested through strikes, how we're protesting even now, because we're in a very difficult moment in our country's history. We're in a difficult season, I'd like to say. So I wanted to ask for both of you, when we say, or when you hear people say art curates history, what does that mean for you? And how do we compare that with how it's curated in our textbooks? What do we start with? Okay.
When you've come from far, you have to be the first to respond. It's my pleasure to be here, really. This is my second time in Kenya, physically, but I've been in Kenya imaginatively since early secondary school. Through, I will marry when I want.
Gahikadeda.
Exactly. And I can't begin this conversation without paying tribute to someone I called my mentor. Not only because we studied his novels and his theater in early secondary school, but because we grew to have a very personal relationship, and that's Ngugi wa Thiong'o. So coming to Kenya for this event was for me also a moment of mourning, to come and mourn a mentor, a friend. We've had a long trajectory together. I spent some time with him in California. He came to my university, and so yeah, this is a heavy moment for me. So just allow me to digest that intensity of the moment. And so being here at this moment in time and talking about the connection between history and literature, between literature and politics, of course, who else than Ngugi wa Thiong'o and a variety of African authors really, are trailblazers as far as these connections are concerned. I remember one thing he told me is, upon all our interactions, the numerous interviews we've done in Irvine University, Gilbert, he never used to call me Gilbert, Ndi, my African name for sure. You know what his relation with retain connections. Yeah. Connection is the key word. Yeah. Connection between cultures, between people, connection between phenomena that seem somewhat unrelated, but you have to create the connection as an author, as a critic. So now to your question, literature as a medium of curation, of curating history, as opposed to the way it's curated in our textbooks. Now, the state actually is a very interesting structure because it seeks to control what comes in and what comes out. It seeks to control education. It seeks to control what people think, what they think about, how they think about it. So this is what Marxist authors, especially Louis Althusser, talked about, the state and its ideological and repressive apparatus. So history is it's a battleground, always between the author, the literary author, and the state and the politicians. Simply because if you don't know your history, of course, you would be ignorant about your present and you won't have any imagination of where you're going to. And we are in post-colonial dispensations. And in the parts of the world where I come from, Francophone Africa, there's a kind of steady genealogy, between regimes, colonial regimes and the post-colonial regimes that we have here. So there's kind of a faulted transition that Africa has experienced. It is more or less the same in every African country, but it's almost more dramatic in the Francophone part of Africa, yeah, where independence was simply distributed. It was a kind of like France just said, okay, it's time. It's fashionable to grant independence to African countries. Mm-hmm. And so independence ended up being, I call it handed, because that's how it was in most cases in Francophone African countries. Those who fought for independence finally saw themselves marginalized, and so that we have heroes that end up being unrecognized. How many Cameroonians know that we actually fought a war of independence? Because in our history books, it's that Cameroon's independence process was very seamless, smooth, and peaceful. Yeah. So we've lived with memories of wars that are not officially recognized in our textbooks. The War of Independence. With our own Dedan Kemati, for instance, called Robin Omnyobe. And this is, surprisingly, many of you know the work of Achille Mbembe, his groundbreaking work on the post-colony. But I want to tell you that he comes from a particular context, Cameroon context. Achille Mbembe wrote his first, he's a very prominent guy, and we are proud of him. He wrote his first critical work of the post-colony about the War of Independence in his region, the littoral province of Cameroon, where, even women had to contribute to the fight for liberation, where women were actually violated, raped by the by the departing French colonial government. And when independence was finally granted to Cameroonians, the immediate post-independence leadership, jointly with the French army, continued to repress pockets of resistance in Achille Mbembe's region. So that's why you have that visceral dimension in Achille Mbembe's text about what it means to live in a political dispensation where certain bodies have not been accounted for. And these bodies are not, they don't even figure anywhere in the textbooks, because the same regime has mutated and it's still the one dictating what we have to know and what we don't have to know. So that's why the literary author has as obligation to provide an alternative account of the history, which is not very well known amongst Cameroonian citizens, just as an example.
I love that. Thank you. Beautiful answer. I'm going to have the same question to Mugambi. He's spoken from a literature perspective. Maybe you can tell us from a film and theatrical perspective, how are we curating our history through our movies, through our plays?
Thank you for this opportunity, and thanks for being here, guys. I will say this. Regardless, our history will be curated one way or another. I'll give a few examples. One, the most recent one being the history that is now being built. The archive that is being built about the events of literally the day before yesterday. For those of you that were out in the streets, for those of you that are Kenyan or in Kenya right now, you know, it's a difficult time, so I just want to acknowledge that. It's wonderful to be sat here in peace and enjoying a nice conversation, but I think it's also worthy to acknowledge that there's a lot of stuff going on in our psyches, in our collective consciousness, our hearts, our souls, our bodies. History, I believe, is going to be curated regardless, but it really comes down to the cleanliness of the vessel. And by mean the cleanliness of the vessel, I mean the storyteller, the archivist. And the archivist, if you listened to some press conferences going on yesterday, the archivist of the events that were happening during Maandamano said that Kenyans, peaceful Kenyans, were the ones that were causing all of the trouble that was going on the streets. They were the ones that were responsible for the destruction of property, for endangering the lives of our police officers who in his archive are the victims here and the heroes, and were also responsible for the breakage of many bodies and the death of many people. That the citizens that went out on the streets to agitate for change are the ones that are the bad guys in that archive of history. I'll take another example. Right now on stage at the Kenya National Theatre, the trial of Dedan Kimathi is being put up on stage, written by Goge wa Thiong'o and Michere Mugo. And that they have decided to be archivists in telling a semi-truthful but also semi-fictional account of the trial. Now, we are talking about events here with the trial of Dedan Kimathi that are more than half a century in the past, right? When we're talking about more than half a century of the events of 2025 and 2024, what is that archive going to look like once we have set right from the starting blocks with the police were innocent, the Kenyans were the villains? Regardless, that is going to be sifted through the years. History is going to do its thing. My prayer is that there is going to be a Michere, and there is going to be a Goge, and there's going to be a Ngatia, and an Abu, and a Helen. I'm listing the writers of Tomboya, and a Magunga, who are going to actually sift through the actual events and be the clean vessels, the clean archivists, the ones that are coming in just so that they can tell the events as they were. Of course, there's going to be a subjectivity, but the subjectivity needs to come from a clean vessel, from the point of view of telling the truth and positioning that truth so that it allows us to look at ourselves with time flattened, knowing who we were, who we are, and who we are going to be. Unfortunately, the archivists who are in power right now want to tell us who we are seen through them, and they'll flatten time so that they are the everlasting. They're the omniscient and the omnipresent. But I hope that there are Kenyans out there, and I know there's people from around the world here, from around Africa, who are going to be the clean archivists and the vessels through which history is archived. Because again, I'll just go back to the sentence I said at the beginning, whether we like it or not, this history will be archived.
Absolutely. It's powerfully written or powerfully spoken. Because they say history is written by the victorious, isn't it? And maybe to some extent by the powerful, because you're the one who has the pen and you're the one who can, but like you said, hopefully there's all these other players who can be the clean vessels. I like that quote. I'm gonna borrow from what you've said and give you another question. Basically, how do you then, as a storyteller, and I'll also pass this on to Gil, how do you balance storytelling with truth-telling? At what point does your artistic license, when you're dramatizing history, how do you ensure that, yes, you can have that license, but at the same time, you wanna honor what history actually was? How do you balance as a writer, as a director?
It's a good question. Start with the truth. Start with the truth. Always start with the truth. Yeah. Start with the events as they happened. Remove all subjectivity from it. Once you have that as your framework, throw all the subjectivity that you want in it. I'll give you an example. Katikati, which is a film that I co-wrote with Mbithi that I might have heard about during Kui's intro.
You refused me to do the whole CV,
I was
but
feeling shy.
okay.
I was feeling shy. I was feeling shame on me, but I'll talk about it though. It's a film that came out in 2017, I believe, and tells the story of Kenyans. A lady who wakes up in a wilderness somewhere, doesn't know how she got there, and makes her way to a lodging, the only place that she can see in the middle of this vast wilderness, and gets there and realizes that she's in a place called Katikati, and it's a holdover place once you've died, for you to deal with all the stuff that you dealt with, that you didn't deal with when you were alive, so that you can go to your next stage of the afterlife. Watch it. It's a very accessible film. It's a beautiful film. We're still very proud of it. It's on Netflix, Katikati. And we had to address some things. We had to address the grief that we were feeling around friends that we'd lost to suicide. But the film, the basis of the film is guilt and grief. Guilt and shame and grief. And all of the things that you're guilty about and shameful about in your past life. And one of the things that we had to deal with was the post-election violence. And we had a pastor who is dealing with the guilt of having let his parishioners die in a church that was set on fire during the post-election violence. I'm sure all of this sounds familiar to truthful events that actually happened. So we set the basis of the truth. The fact that there are people that might be feeling guilty, and that there are people who might cross over to the afterlife having been victims or perpetrators of that. There's one particular person who's still very much alive who was one of the perpetrators one time. So if we then decide to take the events of 2007 and 2008 and have them be truthful, that people died in a church that shouldn't have died, and then we throw our subjectivity on it, that subjectivity looked like a guilty pastor, a guilty reverend who could have saved those people, and instead let them die, and then has himself being haunted in the afterlife by these people who appear to him as a choir who will always sing dirges whenever he's alone. His thoughts manifested as a choir that sing dirges to him. And at one point, the dirges get to him so much that he sets all of these paintings on fire, because he loved to paint, and he loved to paint landscapes of the Rift Valley to sort of cleanse the images of blood in his mind. He would draw all of these nice images, but he paints them all red first, and this choir that has appeared to him in red then sings him out of his room and out into the wilderness, where he disappears and is never seen again. That is his afterlife. That's it. That's taking truth and applying a lot of subjectivity onto it. That's the story to tell you what the template is. I hope you can apply it how you will.
It's a beautiful plug for Katikati, the movie, now showing on Netflix. I love that. Gil, you're primarily a researcher. I know that's your first love. Yeah. But you're also a fiction author because you have 2 novels. So same question, how do you then ensure that you're being truthful? Because you want to curate this history, and you want to make sure that people know the story, but at the same time, you want to entertain. So how do you tread that fine line?
Yes, I mean, I'm primarily, I earn my living as a researcher, primarily. But of course, I've also ventured into the world of creative writing with 2 books. And your question actually goes to the heart of the intentionality behind the two books. The first book that I wrote, which I was privileged to have a blurb by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, was Letter from America, Memoirs of an Adopted Child, which is a travelogue about me traveling to Latin America for the very first time. So I imagine myself as kind of black Pizarro, black Herman Cortez. I mean, these are like the conquistadors of Latin America. Yeah. And so, but I was carrying a different kind of message, you know, trying to know the traces of African culture in this part of the world. But I actually used the form of the chronicle, which is how these early adventurers, violent adventurers, reported back to Europe what they had seen in the American continent. So it contained a lot of exaggerations, a lot of hyperbolical language. But so I wanted to use, and it's a very humorous text, but also without, you know, bypassing the tragedy of that history. You know, what lies beneath the traces of black culture in Latin America. And my intention was, because when we talk about African American, most of us, we think mostly of North America, and here was I in another America, which still is quite unknown to us, Latin America, because of the language issue too. So we forget that the largest black diaspora is in Brazil, in Colombia, and black minorities in Peru. So I wanted to tell these stories. And I needed to do a lot of historical research, you know, to know exactly what happened, the figures of enslaved Africans, the liberators, and how they were killed, but at the same time to entertain in the same way that those initial chronicles were also meant to be entertaining to European readers. Now, but your question goes even more to the heart of my second text, which is called Radio and Other Stories, which is actually, I'm 42 years old now, and I'm one of those unfortunate ones who, at 42, has known only one head of state in my life. Wow. When I say this, I become a kind of a moving touristic site. So you are free to consider me one. So this book is a kind of like allegory, what it means to grow up in a kind of really what I call androgynous regime, you know. Neither overtly dictatorial nor a real democracy. So we call it bureaucracy. It's a kind of Paul Biya's version of bureaucracy. So I wanted to tell the story of, so I tell it through childhood memoirs. Yeah. And this goes right at the center of what do you say about what it means to remain truthful, but at the same time to craft a creative piece out of history. Now, there's an incident that I narrate in this book. It was a massacre committed in my hometown, Ndu, by the Biya regime. As most of you know, the transition that came after the fall of the Berlin Wall was actually truncated in most parts of Africa. You know, some held national conferences. In your own country, Arab Moy succeeded in twisting things around and still, you know, maintain himself through the 1990, 91, 92 years. Most leaders used devious means. Some claimed that they were actually opening up the system, but then still found Biya succeeded in maintaining himself in power by rigging elections. So at that particular moment, there was a massacre in my community. So that is 1992. I was 10 years old. So what does it mean to tell the story of this massacre? It's actually lived history. But then I wasn't there. You know, I was 10 years old. So I need to tell that history. Of course, I did research to know about who died, under what circumstances. But I think that the medium that I use, childhood, a child's sensibility, puerile kind of approach to events, actually even proved more efficient than if I were just to narrate the story as it was. Because here was I, a child, you know, of somebody who has been groomed to look at Paul Biya as the father of the nation, you know. And Paul Biya was very handsome when he was young. Even in his old age, he's still a very handsome man. So we had this calendar on the wall, and we used to look at the most handsome president of Africa, and Arab Moy was the ugliest, actually. I still can say.
We don't even know what to say to that.
No lies detected. No lies detected.
So we're like, so I was like, so I would wish this guy to be my second father. His picture was everywhere, in every office, in every living room. But I could not believe that how can someone whom I considered my second father do this to my community? who ordered the police? You know, who, you know, because women had bottles inserted into their private parts. And so I needed to tell this not in its gory and pornographic detail, but rather just from the sensibility of a child. And that has become part of my book that has really echoed with, you know, with my readers, the way I weave that in. I try to remain true to the events, but it's not a very faithful historical account. But what even proves more powerful is the medium of childhood memory that I use to tell the story. Now, literature has, as one French critic has said, nothing but the body. The body. So while history tries to look at the macro narratives and how it affects groups, literature puts the individual, the body, like, you know, that mnemonic aspect of literature is what makes us relate with it much more. Because be it literature, be it history, we are all trying to inscript the past. And what is narrated to us as history is actually someone's story, someone's, of course, reading of that past. And that's why most African novels, most postmodernist and postcolonial novels prefer the fragmented narrative as an approach to history. So you have events that happen, but then you have characters who experienced it differently and differentially.
Yeah. Thank you. That's beautifully put. Where can we find this book? This is The Radio and Other Stories, isn't it? Gil Ndi-Shang. So we'll talk about where we can get the book in as we wind up the session. So right now, I'd say globally, we're witnessing a sort of shift towards the far right. And there's more conservatism, there's more censorship, so to speak. I mean, we have the US removing some historical figures and erasing them from their history, which is quite interesting. Because sometimes we say that artistic interpretations of history often provoke backlash, right? So in your experience, and I know we've touched on this a little bit, who controls how history gets told? We've talked about that, but now the question is, how do you feel censorship has shaped what is possible in performance or literary work? And we can talk about this in both contexts. And you talked about Ngugi wa Thiong'o in 1977 rather, Gahi Kadeda, I'll Marry When I Want, and that is the play that actually perhaps began the proper censorship of literature in Kenya, and we are just now recovering, right? Because in West Africa, we have so many published works, like the literary space is grown. But for us, we're just now, in the past 10 years, coming into our own and publishing more and growing the industry. So how do you feel then, is the question. How has censorship shaped what is possible in performance and literary work? And yeah, and how do we get around that? Let me go back, or rather go to you, Mugambi, because we all watched Tomboya. You did not censor yourself. In fact, it was, because the first edition was in 2019, isn't it? And in subsequent editions, you guys refreshed the script to actually reflect what was happening. And I remember my husband and I watching the play and we're like, whew, these people are not scared, my God. So how, from that perspective, especially from that piece of work, did you feel you were censored, or do you feel censorship kept you from going all the way?
I like that you framed the question by saying, what has censorship made possible? Because I imagine the question would be more logical to ask, what has censorship made impossible? So yes, I think that's the correct way to ask what it has made possible. Yeah. We wrote and performed Mboya as a piece that was... We were choching. Sorry, we were agitating. Yes, we were welcoming.
Thank you. What's the Francophone version of that?
I don't know.
Well,
we were angling to be censored. I'll give an example again. In 2019, there was a song that became part of the Kenyan culture called Wamlambez, Wamnyonyez. That is a very difficult phrase to translate. And when I translate it now, let's just work together.
We'll talk later. We'll talk later.
Let's work together. Wamlambez Wamnyonyez means it is to do with licking, and it is to do with sucking. And the first time it came out, it was in reference to ice cream, but the youth of Kenya at that point made it something else. And this was a song that was celebrating licking and sucking. Take that how you will. And this song was not banned, but it was by the Deputy Jesus of the time. Ezekiel Mutua, who was the head of the Kenya Film and Classification Board, but took it upon himself to censor everything censorable. And he said that this song is not a song that is welcome in public performance, and because he couldn't ban the song, he restricted it. And no one knew what restrict meant. Yeah. In the writing of the play, we were able to put in a really funny pun that then invited people to do a call and response. Because Omlambez, Omnyonyez, every time I say it, I'm like, here we are at the NBO Lit Festival talking about Omlambez.
Live streaming, Kwanzaa.
Yeah. And we're live streaming. It's a call and response song. So when the person leading the chant goes Omlambez, the people who are responding go Omnyonyez. And because Mboya really took on the African call and response way of storytelling, there was a lot of interaction. We wanted to invite people to do Omlambez Omnyonyez, but knew that it is a restricted song. So what we decided to do was put it in. Again, we were chochaing, we were agitating, and actually we drew a thread between censorship in music and theater and took it all the way back to Nazi Germany, where Hitler did the exact same thing. So one of the cast members says, when the director, which is me, in character as the director, comes out and says, we can't perform this song, one of the actors says, fuck censorship and fuck the mustachioed guy. Ezekiel, Deputy Jesus, was very well known for his mustache. And someone said, do you mean Hitler or Stalin? And he's like, no, but I like your thinking. And then someone comes and says, actually, Nazi Germany did censorship. And then Mboya jumps in front and goes, Wamlambez. And the crowd goes, Omnyonyez. And it was a beautiful moment that we brought together, that we fashioned in the middle of rehearsal. Yeah. This is 2019. Now in 2024, when we brought back Mboya, of course, we had to address it again. So we took all the Maandamano songs that had become something of anthems that the state now doesn't like, because they are very agitational, if that's a word.
Is that a word?
I don't know if it's a word,
Agitating?
but they agitate. Zinachocha.
Agitatious?
Yeah, agitatious. Yeah. And also, because there are songs right now that make Wamlambez Omnyonyez look like, a lullaby. Yeah, like sing it to your child. And we threw all of those in there to still make the statement that even if Deputy Jesus is not in power, there is a bigger Deputy Jesus that is not just leading a KFCB, he's leading a K. You understand? Yeah, he's leading an entire country. He's now our Deputy Jesus, but Chief Satan. So it gave us the opportunity. Yeah, I might be censored for that, but it gave us the opportunity. It gave us the opportunity to go around and actually say, this is what censorship does. Yeah. This is the stuff that we censored, but let us now make a comment on censorship using things that we can't say on stage.
So to answer the question, you just got more creative.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes, that's what we did. Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
The views on this stage do not necessarily represent. Dun, dun, dun. I'm gonna actually, I'll pivot a little bit to ask a slightly different question to Dr. Ndi. Gil, language, because you speak 9 of them. Do you want to list what those 9 are, so that we can test you? English, obviously.
For sure, English, French, and Spanish are my working languages, my research languages. I speak Limbom, which is that of my ethnic group. I speak Lamso, which is a neighboring ethnic group language. And I speak, of course, English, French, no, I named French, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. And currently, seriously learning Kiswahili. Yeah, seriously.
Okay.
Remember, Wamlambez.
Asante sana.
That's not the one you should be learning, though.
Mungu akubariki.
So I'm gonna go to a quote from your friend Gogi, in Decolonizing the Mind: The Politics of Language in African Literature, and he said, "Language as culture is the collective memory bank of a people's experience in history. So it is very important for us to keep on, speaking our languages, writing in our languages, and ensuring that, the languages do not die, because that means our culture will not die." By the way, did you guys know there's a Kamba society is it Peru?
In Colombia.
In Colombia, there's one in Colombia?
You also have like equivalent or counterpart in Bolivia and Peru, also that Spanish language with a substratum of African language still.
God, hey, Wakamba wameenda. Okay, I was reading that the other day and I was like, and they have the same traditions, the same language. No, but yes, except it's far. So it's brilliant that they're able, even to this day, to maintain that culture. I forget, what are they called? I forget.
In Colombia, it's
Yeah.
a palenquero.
Palenquero.
And in Bolivia, it's an Afro-Boliviano. In Peru, it's not that codified as a separate language, but it's a peculiarity of the Spanish spoken in the Chincha community, which is a community 3 hours away from Lima.
Got it. So when we talk about the importance of language, what we did not know about, what we hadn't talked about, Gil over here, is that there's a lady called Paula Moreno. Paula Moreno was the youngest minister of culture in Colombia. She was 28 years old when she was made the minister. And Dr. Ndi over here actually translated her memoir from Spanish to English, isn't it? Yeah. And that must have been something really, really fantastic. So I know you are a champion of language, and I know that that's really deep for you. So again, when it comes to curation of just not our history, but also our culture, we know language is important, but how important is it?
Yes, when you speak your language, you are conveying a genealogy of thought. You are also remembering people. You are also remembering in the sense that Ngugi wa Thiong'o used it. Remembering, putting back the fragments together, incorporating what has been dismembered by history. Yeah. So speaking our language is one of the ways in which we pay tribute to our history, to our culture, and also to our own heroes. Now, Ngugi wa Thiong'o's premise could have been quite difficult and a challenging one to the early generation of African authors. And there was quite a debate around that. We don't know which strand prevailed, whether it's the Achebe and Soyinka strand who said English is our language. I mean, we have some sort of appropriated it and we are going to use it in a way that even would challenge the normative understanding of that language by the British man. So in as much as that became the pragmatic option, but Ngugi wa Thiong'o was a man ahead of his time, you know. So he challenged us to begin a movement. And that movement that Ngugi wa Thiong'o argued for in the 1960s, as a young African scholar at Makerere, he was really at the sidelines, you know, when the Achebe was already a big name, Soyinka too. But you can see that all over Africa, there's a kind of cultural movement. I don't know whether it's the same thing in Kenya, but in Cameroon, our communities have, you know, begun standardizing their languages and devising all kinds of didactic materials in those languages. As I'm speaking now, we are working on a volume of our history in our language, of the Mbom people. And this is something that, I mean, I see there are WhatsApp groups everywhere trying to document this history in our own language, even in diasporic communities. You know, so we are now teaching ours. My kids are born in Germany, some born in Colombia, but now I have that obligation to teach them Limbo, even in as much as they master French, Spanish, and English, and German, of course. So it is a challenge, but we need to make the world live its pluriversal nature, its heritage. Because imagine that we had colonized Britain. Which language would the world be speaking? So we don't have to take that for a given. You know, that's why he said moving the center. So there's no center, actually. Yeah. Center is defined by global politics that has a genealogy in imperialism. So I think it's at the core of many African governments now, those that are, you know, Senegal, Cameroon is not yet on that list, that are really promoting the teaching of indigenous languages in schools. It's not as easy as it seems. And I remember Ngugi wa Thiong'o being astonished when I told him that Kenya is a very monolithic country for me as a Cameroonian. You know, you guys have only 43.
Only.
For me, it's only because Cameroon with 30 million, we have 283 ethnic groups, which means 283 languages. Okay. So the challenge is, which ones do you bring to the table? But then these initiatives are being taken even at the grassroots level. Yeah. We are taking matters into our own hands. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. From a Kenyan perspective, are we doing the same, real quick? I mean, that'll be Half-Life though, Sheng.
Yes, I actually, yeah.
Tomboya had 2 lines of Luo.
You bring that a good point. That's a good point. First, I'll confess on this Nairobi Lit Fest stage that I do not speak my mother tongue. My parents, let's just say, I was a bit of a slow kid. It took me a while to speak. I started speaking at age 4. Before then, the little I spoke a lot of Kimeru. But my parents getting very, very worried about my fortunes in the world outside, that was very Anglophone, then decided to, despite both being Meru, decided that the default language in the house was going to be English. My mother was an English teacher. Her mother was an English teacher. Her dad was an English teacher as well. I mean, we grew up in English. But we have to acknowledge the thing that happened in 1997 when an album called Kenyan, the first chapter, came out. And there was a song in there called Tafsiri Hii by Kala Mashaka. And it was the first hit song that was in Sheng that said, Tafsiri Hii, maisha huku dini mazi, ndio maana tuna something kwa MIC. Yes, ndio maana tunalia tukitumia MIC. Tafsiri hii, ingawa tuko chini, bado tumaini, sikiza kwa makini. Yeah, exactly. And it was the first time we're hearing poetry in a language that would then become the lingua franca and actually establish the monolith that he speaks about. Yeah. So whichever part of the country that you go to now, English and Kiswahili are not the lingua franca. It's actually going to be Sheng. And there's a way that Sheng transmits so quickly that started then in 97, where it was really restricted to Islando and certain areas of Nairobi, and then became not just a countrywide phenomenon, but a global phenomenon. Back to Amlambez, when Theresa May was leaving 10 Downing Street, there was live footage of her entering her taxi cab, not her taxi, her limousine, to leave 10 Downing, and there was a crowd of people that were watching her. And it was captured on video with someone saying, Wamlambez, as she was getting into her car. I don't know if you remember that video. Wamlambez became a global thing. Jamie Foxx said Wamlambez. There were pop artists who are meeting Kenyans and were learning what this thing is.
And now they're Angukanayo folks.
And now there is One Time and Angukanayo and all of that stuff. Our lingua franca really has become Sheng. Kusema ikutoke. There's some things that you can't really translate into English, but they are so sweet when they are said in Sheng. And Sheng borrows from all the languages that we were cut off from, including mine, which is Kimeru. And that's the power of it.
I love it. So beyond Sheng then, also we need to look at our too small to languages over here. I feel like we were insulted really intelligently, monolithic. But yeah, I feel like we do need to do some work in order to, ensure that beyond even all these other languages that we have, also come out. The screen went off, so I think we have like about 10 minutes. So a final question before we have some questions from the audience. So the question here being, as African creators and scholars working within global academic and artistic spaces, how do you ensure that local historical truths are not diluted for international consumption? So are there risks of performing Africanness for the global stage? And how do you stay grounded? Let's start with Gil.
This is a question that actually appeals more to my academic side as a researcher. And yeah, it's very important because the question that I asked myself when I went to Germany to study African literature comparatively was, why do I have to go to Germany to study African literature? And common, like Germans in the street actually ask me. So it keeps bugging me every day, and I have to justify it, by the way I practice my literary criticism. Yeah. So it stems from the fact that our archives actually are even more obtainable in the West than back home. Even currently, when a Cameroonian author publishes a book, it's first available in fact, the University of Bayreuth has almost everything on Africa, like every single book. And sometimes manuscripts, sometimes things dating back to the colonial, pre-colonial times, they have these things. So that's why sometimes we have to go there to study. But we have to question ourselves because we are in institutional settings. In Germany, for instance, the universities have to put forward a research agenda in order to obtain funding from the federal government. Yeah. And sometimes some of the research topics in the humanities and social sciences still carry, traces of really very colonialist imagination of Africa.
Yeah.
And so sometimes as a Cameroonian, researcher in a German university, you might just be a token to say, okay, we have a black person, a professor, and all that. I mean, so we are inclusive and all that. So I'm aware of all these roles that I play. I'm aware that I can be used as a token. So I devise means of trying to stay relevant. And sometimes that's how I actually navigate between the creative and the academic. Sometimes when I discover that I need to curate a particular research project to suit what the German Research Foundation expects from me, there are themes that I would address more in my creative works than even in my academic work, because the academic jargon also panders to a particular class, a particular elite. Our articles are published in those journals that are not accessible, to the common man. Yeah. So how do you come down from that ivory tower to make yourself relevant? And I'll give you an example. And you pointed at the fact that I translated the autobiography of the first female minister in Colombian history. Now, this was a vehement act on my side. I was in Colombia on a very prestigious fellowship by the Humboldt Foundation. And I was in a very high-class, highbrow university where some who met me there thought that I was maybe teaching athletics or physical education, because they don't imagine a black man in Colombia teaching in La Universidad de los Andes. It's like their own Harvard. So I began imagining myself, what do I do to connect with my brothers and sisters here? Now, because I'm being used also as a token in that university, that's why I decided to link up with this former minister who has an NGO called Visible Hands. And her work is actually transatlantic because she's collaborated with a lot of Kenyan civil society actors. She was here some few months ago, Paola Moreno, working together to promote Afro-diasporic and now African youth in the domain of writing, the domain of business. And through her own trajectory, a lot of Afro-Colombians have gained access into spaces like Harvard, because she also went to Harvard, Yale, MIT, Cambridge, where she studied. So we devised a program that almost took me away from my research at the university, which I also intentionally titled in Swahili, Maneno ya Kuwezesha. How do you translate that in English? Words that empower. Now, I had to call a friend of mine, Fred Mbogo. I think Fred is an actor too, to say, how do you say words that empower in Swahili? And so we devised this program where we were using African literature as a tool of empowerment amongst young Afro-Colombian authors. Because when they start writing, they are told that their own works, their own writings are just mere folkloric scribblings, they are not literature. But when we treated Ngugi wa Thiong'o's works, when we treated Chimamanda's works, when we treated Alain Mabanko's works with them, they discovered that they are writing from a tradition that is in their blood, a transatlantic tradition. So they felt empowered, to believe in what they were writing and to write their own stories from the margin, addressing what is known to be high culture in Colombia, which is actually the culture of the Creole, the European-descended Colombians. So this is how I actually made myself relevant, using German money, but now working in Afro-Colombian communities. And I've done same in Peru and Bolivia, and I'm still doing more in this direction.
I love that. You recognize the tokenism, but at the same time, let me show you what I can do with it. I love that. International Film Festival, man. Were you tempted to have a different kind of edit for certain kind of audiences, or you're just like, here we are in our Kenyanness, deal?
Okay.
Especially also from a funding perspective.
Okay, good. Yeah, I like that. I just want to go back to Kalamashaka and translate what I said with the tafsirihi. Tafsirihi literally means translate this. And the song came out saying, we're not going to speak the language that you are probably used to. We're going to speak our language, and it's up to you to really translate it. So tafsirihi literally means translate this. So I thought I'd add that. Okay, on to performing Africanness, because I like that you put that into the question. This is no disrespect to the OGs I'm going to mention right now. There is a film called Saikati. I don't know if you remember Saikati. directed by an OG in film called Anne Mongai. Sorry, I just saw my friend Kevin. It wasn't him. That's just my buddy at the back. And it tells the story of someone who escapes. She lives in Masai Homestead. And escapes. She's called Saikati. Titular character Saikati is escaping a Masai homestead where she is betrothed to someone to come into the city where she finds love for herself. Saikati was actually shot. The original parts of it were shot in Masai land. Again, please, no disrespect to the OGs. I'm just saying this for storytelling purposes and to answer your question. Educational purposes only. They cast a lady called Mokami Kinoti, playing the role of Saikati. Mokami wasn't raised entirely in Kenya. And you can tell in her accent. She has a very, very Western accent to her. All of the dialogue, as this Maasai girl is contemplating running away from her home in Maasai land to come into the city, is performed in pristine English. A pristine English that now comes into Nairobi, where now she makes the journey. A lot of Kenya's best stories are people leaving the village and coming into the city. Nairobi Half-Life being a good example. And she comes into the city, and then we carry on from there. Yeah. It was just enough to dress her up in her in the Maasai robes and put some things on her and put literally a stocking on her head to portray a bald head. I watching it as a child, I really thought it was a bald head. I couldn't tell that it was a stocking that they'd put on there that was the color of her skin. Yeah. And this film is on YouTube, just in case you're wondering about it, it's entirely on YouTube. Fast forward to some years later, and there was a film called Babu's Babies. About a gentleman who has to ferry a baby across town using, I can't remember why he's doing it, but he's doing it under very difficult circumstances to get this baby to safety, including putting the baby in a kiondo, the kiondo being hung from a matatu. It's a comedic film telling the story of someone who is coming of age while taking care of a baby. Kenyan film. It starred Lona Irungu, God rest her soul, we miss her so much, and Eddie Mbogwa. And again, these two characters who are supposed to be in the poorest of the poorest areas of Kibera, again, speaking very pristine English. All they had to do was place them in the costume and in the place, and everything else was, they had to perform the Africanness of the situation, but from just a little bit of the performance, and then go all the way with the things that were familiar, like language and what have you. There's no space for any of that now. And we have the world to thank in really telling authentic stories and pushing for them to be told, that we have to follow suit. I would never have known while we were shooting Nairobi Half-Life, that again is, I'm the Barbie. I'm the, how do you translate Barbie? The upmarket person from Babylon. The Babylon system, who comes from the upmarket part of Nairobi speaking in English, but a lot of it is the Sheng of the place, and it's deep Sheng. Yeah. And a lot of people, when I realized you put the subtitles there, and everything else translates so easily. It's still a coming-of-age story, someone making it out of the village into the city, and it translates so well that it has become one of the most watched films. Supermodo is mostly Kiswahili and Kikuyu, and still, people are able to love it. It was adopted in the syllabuses in Poland and Sweden for children of that age because it has such educational themes around it. And now is on Encyclopedia Britannica as one of the best films for children, and won the equivalent of the European Oscar Awards for children's films. Yeah. It's you just put it out there. It's the themes we're looking for. It's the people. It's the things that we can catch on to and say, this is who we are, that people are looking for now. We don't have to perform anymore. All we have to do is be.
Love that. I had a couple more questions, but I'm seeing we have 3 minutes. So let's get questions from the audience before we wind up. Mr. Irongo 1, Mr. who? Ryan 2, Miss Mudhoni 3. One more. Okay, those are the 3. Irongo, go ahead. Can someone give him a mic? Oh, you have a question? Do you have a question? Oh, okay, sawa. Okay, they can. Okay, gotcha. Oh, come here. Oh, so that you can be seen on the live stream. I'm sorry that took so long to catch on. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
That instruction should have been given to us before. We would have kept quiet. Quick question. Artificial intelligence in the realm of politics. How will we see this? Is it a form of art? And will it be put under a genre called science fiction in 10 years' time? Question.
Love that. Okay. Next, Mr. Ryan.
My question is for Dr. Ndi. I observe this tension between engaging with our heritage and genealogy through our language and sort of stewarding our colonial heritage, our institutions, navigating rural-urban migration, a globalized world stage, and reconciling all the differences between 283 tribes in Cameroon, 43 tribes here. How do you think about the future, navigating through all this tension?
Fantastic. And the last question.
So mine's a comment, not a question, because I don't follow rules. But I thought about this when we started the session and we're talking about history. And, you know, Mugambi, you talked about, I'm trying to put it in the beautiful words that you put it, the conveyor of history or something, or who writes the history. We're talking
clean
about
vessel.
Yes,
did you
clean
say?
vessel.
Clean vessel, yes.
Thank you, clean vessel. And I think my comment to that, and I would also want to, you know, to hear what you think about it, is I feel like we're at a really different time now where history is being written and rewritten at the same time. So you made reference to the, you know, Wednesday's riots where the government are the good guys. Demonstrations, see? Demonstrations where government, police are the good guys and the, you know, peaceful citizens who were demonstrating, protesting, or even in remembrance of the people who died last year were villainized. And I'm looking at it, that story has been rebutted instantly, right? And that's what we did not have in history, because now is when we're trying to rewrite, you know, Kimathi, right? This is when we're trying to rewrite the history of Africa. This is when we're trying to rewrite who exactly were these leaders? Who exactly was Kenyatta, right? Kenyatta Senior. But I see that this time, I think with the tools and with the benefit of hindsight and with what we're learning, I don't know, I feel like we're doing better into capturing those moments, documenting history, and making it balanced in the moment, as opposed to, you know, our kids and our forefathers, then 50 years later, people saying, oh, actually, it wasn't the protesters or demonstrators, it was the police. I think we have been able to rebuttal and rewrite it in the moment, and I think it's a powerful thing that the new generation and we're doing, and it's because we're conscious about who is writing, who is documenting, who is telling these stories, and how do we own the stories that we're telling. So yeah, just a comment and a thought that I had when I was listening to you.
Thank you so much. History in situ. All right, so Dr. Ndi, you want to go first with Ryan's question, and then now you can take AI.
Yes, exactly. First of all, I think I want to answer your question first about the, you know, this plurilingual context and then how we envisage the future in a multinational context of a post-colonial state. At the same time, we see the need to go back to our, you know, what we forget is that, I mean, Africa has its own cosmopolitanism, I mean, from the very base. So these communities actually are not monolithic. I mean, there are transfusions in between these communities. I mean, even though they are independent ethnic groups, but, you know, you find migratory trends amongst them. For instance, in a typical Cameroonian sense, we say Paul Biya, our head of state, is from the Beti, from the, you know, the ruling. But then you will discover that no, he is not even, he was actually, he's a migrant of a neighboring community whose forefathers lived in the BT community. So there is no one who is just fundamentally Wimbo like myself, or fundamentally Betty, or fundamentally, I'm sure you know about the Bamili case in Cameroon. They're like the most business-minded group in Cameroon. So they are everywhere. They intermarry, so that in this difficult moment in Cameroon where there are ethnic tensions, almost ethno-fascism about We cannot have a Bamileke in power. It must be somebody from Paul Biya's and the group. Oh, we need to deconstruct even the Bettiness of Paul Biya. He is not even Betty. You know, so all this, we are seeing the constructedness, you know, of these, what we call in French, repli identitaire, this fall back on the ethnic community as a way of gaining political capital, you know, to antagonize people in the political sphere. So this is what I see as a trend, that we are going to, at the same time, build a plurinational state, but respecting the particularity of our communities, where we can be able to remember, you know, our heroes. In Limbom, you know, community, we remember those who made contributions to the Limbom, because the post-colonial state is not just a monolithic. I mean, we have several states that were yoked together by the colonial master to be, and if we don't recognize those, then we are building powder cakes that will crumble in the near or distant futures.
True.
Now, the question about AI, yes, it's a serious question for both for us in the domain of research. We've had to devise new means of evaluating students now. When you set a question, you don't know who has answered the question, whether it's AI or it's the intellect of the student speaking. So we've been having several, you know, faculty meetings on how to deal with AI, in the sense that now you have to tell all your questions in a very specific, like, fragment, so that when a student is answering, you know that it's a particular practical response which cannot be replicated by AI.
So you need the AI to tell you that this was not AI generated. Basically.
Yes, exactly. You need the AI. So it's both. It's what a very famous critic, Derrida, called pharmacon, both the poison and the antidote. So you use it to detect the fact that it has been used to give you a particular feedback. But the way you solicit responses from students now has to be rethought. This is the challenge to pedagogy that we have now. Yes.
Absolutely. You can take the same.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on the AI.
Real quick.
Yes, very, very quickly.
Thank you.
I don't know if you remember, I think this happened about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. Pictures came out that caused a lot of, they went viral. AI-generated pictures of old African people showcasing beautiful African attire on a runway. At the same time, a picture of Pope Francis looking very gangster in a jacket came out, and people couldn't tell whether it was real or not. More recently, just again 3 days ago, going back to Mandamano, you saw a lady pole vaulting over the razor wire, which was not a real image. That didn't actually happen. But back to those old people on the fashion runway. People went crazy over those images. They were AI generated. This artist who came up with those images simply fed prompts into a computer, but was celebrated as someone who had put together something on the level of wonderful photography or artistry that had never been seen before, and was celebrated as one of the modern day, or towards Michelangelo's, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, we've never seen anything of that sort. Again, Andy Warhol, you know? And he did interviews, he featured on many articles. However, he was very quickly forgotten when Midjourney went fully democratized and anyone had access to it, and they were making their own images. And 2 years later, a lot of what we have on the internet is referred to as AI what? Slop. Slop is the correct answer. What he made 2 years ago would now be called AI slop. The fact that artificial intelligence is trying to mimic humanity, I believe, is having us reach deeper into what makes us human. That is my way of trying to comfort myself around the thing that's coming, because of the things I'm doing, I'm being made more useless. However, there is a way that you look at artificially generated images and video now that gives you a factor to it, and a sort of angling for something that is more human. You want to go touch a leaf or hug another human after you've interacted with that stuff. Yeah. Let's face it, artificial intelligence is going to mimic us even better, which means that we have to mimic ourselves better than it can, whatever that looks like.
Man stay ahead of machine. Okay.
In being man.
In being man. All right. Unfortunately, our time is up, but I will give both guests 10 seconds to give us their closing remarks. Oh, goodbye.
All right.
Whatever you want to say.
Yeah,
Who do we start with? Start with you?
I can begin.
Go
It's
ahead.
fine.
Yeah.
People have enjoyed this conversation so much. I was very, very nervous. I have been nervous. But listening to what has been said here and just the energy in the room has been wonderful. Whatever it is that you're doing, I hope that you can go out and tell your story bravely with the blessing of our ancestors. If there was any time to tell our stories truthfully and bravely, now is that time. I wish you well in that regard.
Fantastic. Dr. Lee?
Yes, I would use this time to make a statement on the issue of censorship. I want to say that some of the world's best canons, classical text, literary text, have been written under moments of and dispensations of censorship. And a pertinent example in my case is that the novels of Sonny Labo Tangsi. If you've never heard about this author, go search for his works. He wrote a text called L'État honteux, the shameful state. Because he was writing under a Marxist communist regime in Congo Brazzaville, he needed to sugarcoat his metaphors in a way that was not seen as referring to the regimes at the moment. But then because the author is not a journalist, he goes beyond. So he's not only writing for the moment, he's writing a work that is transtemporal, that can be read at far stretch, temporally and spatially. So when you read The Shameful State, you will think that he's talking about the state as a political structure, but he's talking about the state of humanity in general. Because Sonny Labo Tangsi thought that to be a human being is not a given. We are all human beings, but to be human is a challenge that we need to ask ourselves, especially at this moment in time, where one would ask, like Omi Baba or Walter Benjamin, what kind of moment is this?
Got it.
Where hatred is so visceral. How do authors respond to this moment?
I love it. That's how a professor of comparative literature says goodbye. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Gil Ndi-Shang, please give him a round of applause. And of course, Mr. Mugambi Nthiga as well. A big, big applause for him. The session has been All the World's a Stage. Really hope you have enjoyed it. My name is Kui Kabala. Enjoy the rest of the festival. So sorry we went overboard. It just was a good conversation. Have yourselves a lovely evening.